I think there's a lot of blame being put here at Ofsted's door that the right processes and procedures weren't in place for the early years teams to tell Ofsted what they feared might be going on. But surely, does it really take mechanisms and procedures? Surely if they had concerns, they could have just raised the phone, sent an email and raised them. There was nothing stopping them, was there? Just because there were no procedures?
That's a very good question, and why we put our recommendations together. I don't think people are seeking to place blame. I mean, that's not the purpose of the serious case review. It is to expose the weaknesses in the system and say, how do we fill that gap? But the requirements of Ofsted, and we have in Plymouth, and I'm sure in other parts of the country, have picked up the phone to Ofsted to express concerns about settings. But what Ofsted are required to do is only take action if there has been a breach of the regulations. And as you'll see in the report, the Early Years Advisory Service had not had any safeguarding concerns reported to them. They had none themselves. And therefore there were no breach of the regulations, because if anybody had had concerns about safeguarding, they would have indeed done just as you said and picked the phone up and followed it up in writing. Two things have happened since. As a safeguarding board, we have said, well, regardless of those regulations, if in future we find that a setting is unwilling to take on advice, and you've seen that language used in the report, a setting that was isolated and unwilling to accept challenge and take advice on board. If we get settings such as that in the future, we will just contact Ofsted regardless of the regulations. But something even more powerful, as a lever has heard, and Mr. Gould has referred to that this morning, which is since September, the government has introduced a new code of practice that means that where we are unsatisfied that a setting is operating to a particular set of criteria and standards, that we have the power now to withdraw funding. And that's a very important and powerful lever that we now have in local authorities across the country, just introduced a few weeks ago. So what we are currently doing in Plymouth is talking to every nursery about the criteria and the standard that we require them to operate at. They have to sign a provider agreement, and if they don't meet that standard, in our judgment, we will withdraw funding. And that's certainly the parents last night were taking a great deal of reassurance from the action that we've taken as a local safeguarding board, and also this new power that has been given to us.
And do you think under the new rules, if this was 2 years ago, 2 years later, sorry, do you think Little Ted's would not have been funded by you, would not have been under your auspices, it would have been postponed if you'd seen what you saw?
I need to remind you that Little Ted's was a private nursery. It wasn't a local authority nursery. If it had been a local authority nursery, we would have closed it down, or we would have changed the management, changed the staff, changed the governance. As a local authority, we would not have operated that nursery if it had been ours.
Are you saying that you could now withdraw the funding, the financial support, even if it's a private one, yeah?
Yes.
So
yes.
Would you do that if you now had the power? If you had those powers 18 months ago, do you think this particular nursery would not have been operated?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay.
Whistle, can I ask what factors would specifically have led you to that decision?
Specifically, if they were demonstrating unwillingness to accept challenge and willingness to implement the requirements for improvement that we had given to them. If we saw an inability or an unwillingness to do that over time, that meant that the children in the nursery were not getting a good offer, we would have withdrawn funding, and we will withdraw funding.
And that was the case in Little Ted's. They were unwilling to change, they were unwilling to accept challenge.
That's the finding.